Thank you for bearing with us.
Yes, yes.
We're back. I hope in terms of sound, we're back fine. Are we? Yeah? Okay. So let me welcome to the first panel in this symposium. We're going to discuss the future of production, but also the future of the design process, because obviously production and the process of design are intimately linked, as you all know. I would like to introduce my fabulous panel, and I'm starting with my neighbor here, Tahir Karmali. Originally hails from Nairobi, Kenya, and he's now based in New York, where he does a master's program in digital photography. He calls himself an artist. Visual artist, but I claim that he's anything on top of that. A designer, just a creative producer, which is also something that I found a lot in my research. It's very multidisciplinary, and people don't really care what they call themselves or what they do. And I find that very interesting because it's in this blurry area where things become really interesting. And Tahir has his latest exhibition was a series of digitally altered photography or digitally created photography.
Photo illustration.
Photo illustration called Juakali. And Juakali, as we heard, means fierce sun and is the Swahili word, or the Swahili word for making, the informal.
It's like the informal industry.
The informal industry. And we will speak about that. So he basically will speak about the maker culture in Africa and the global south in general. Mabeo Minale, next to him, is a designer that most of you probably know. He's part of Minale Maeda, together with Kuniko Maeda, and his work investigates in the open source of the design process. So collaborative processes in design and what that means for the design of future. Ville Kokkonen is also a designer hailing from Finland, and he has his own design office. And for the past 9 years, or 10 almost, 10 years, he was the creative director of the Finnish furniture producer Artek. And I hope he will give us some insight of what it means to work inside the industry and what people do there, because they do think about that, I do know that. In order to meet the future challenges of what it means for design and industrial production, where we maybe reach the end of the industrial era. And to my far left, Peter Mabeo heads and founded a nice and small boutique furniture company in Botswana. And he collaborates with established designers such as Patricia Urquiola, for example. And so we have this very diverse panel with diverse perspectives about production and the design process. So maybe I would like to start with you, Ville. What does the industry think about the future of production?
Oh, big question. Can you hear me, by the way? Is that mic working? Great. Future production. Wow. Regarding the context and today's talk, I think the industry has a lot to learn from this so-called makers community, and even understanding that nowadays design or engineering students can really start to get to know what mass production is, or precise production at the university level or even before. But where that is heading, what are the sort of challenges if nowadays one can almost call these 3D printers, laser cutters, kind of like the power tools that people were able to get for themselves, like the power about that? Where lies the difference between mass produced by hand?
Oh, is that water?
Okay, this is better.
Should we switch it off?
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay.
Oh, I'm on still.
Did you miss the beginning, or did you hear? Okay. So, big companies produce in masses, distribute globally, and will this continue as it is? Will distribution be dispersed? Can we tweak products? This is today, but how much does this? Where's the limit? Can these small communities, small networks, will they become companies and grow and become big companies and then again face the similar difficulties? It's hard to say, but I think we're right now living in a really interesting moment in time where almost anything we imagine is possible. Just like a quick start.
Peter, you have your business model is traditional in some way, and then not so traditional in another way in terms of industry. What do you do?
Hello, I'm Claire. Hi, thanks for the opportunity. I think the model that we conform to, and I like to use the word conform because it's not necessarily a model that I think is the best way for us. But we conform so that we can work in an efficient way in terms of the marketplace. But we want to do this whilst maintaining the spirit of doing things in a way that I think are kind of humane in a sense, like all-encompassing. Because we work with, if you notice in Africa right now, there's an overwhelming push to create a middle class. And this emanates from a commodity-driven economy, extracting minerals, and then with less corruption happening, money's kind of spreading in the community, and then there's less and less emphasis on craft, no interest in craft. So then the push would be for someone like me to set up a company and conform in the fullest sense, business model, and create products for the marketplace so that the developing middle class can benefit from what we do. But we're trying to do this, but not to push against it, but to work along with it, but question in a hesitant way, how is it that our work is moving forward? How's craft really?
So to clarify, you collaborate with international designers, and then the production works how?
Sorry, yes. Well, we have a small workshop. We also collaborate with independent craftspeople, like the basket makers that Ngendi was showing. So for me, it's a question of how can we develop this? Not that it needs development, it's already developed, but how can we do it in such a way that it still remains something that's precious, because there's less and less of it happening. So then, as the outside influences come in, we choose the kind of outside influences that we think will be best for us. Hence my seeking out international designers to collaborate with. And I seek out people who have a similar spirit to the kind of craftspeople we work with, in a different way, but similar nonetheless. So then we work with them, we think about projects to do, a piece, and we collaborate on it. And then we involve the craftspeople that I work with very extensively, and the design process kind of evolves. It's not just a standard design and make, so it's very much an evolving process that's going to continue to change, I assume. So there are no fixed ways of working. It's just the conformance, the structure is there so that we can make the product, we can supply it. Because unfortunately, the marketplace is external. So this is how we
Tahir, can you tell us more about making in the Global South? What does that mean?
I think my mic works. I spoke to the guys beforehand. I'm sorry, guys. I needed to look better. Making. I spent quite a long time at Kuona Trust, which is an art foundation in Nairobi, where you work very closely with a lot of local artists and also international artists that do residency there. And I think you came to visit me at Kuona. And that was basically my first-hand experience working with people that sort of create on the day-to-day basis, and less kind of thinking about, what does this mean? How are we putting this together? How, this extreme amount of forethought before they actually put things together. And working with them was very interesting because it was like creativity straight up in a very base form, I'm going to say it like that. And just watching them create artwork from this Juakali mentality, this informal mentality, to describe their existence or to describe what they're feeling, and less formalized in a manner of how we look at fine art nowadays in that more conceptual manner. But my experience working at Kuona Trust really sort of propelled the way I think of creating work and the way I put things together, and let the process become more organic and less forced and more down to the ground. Did that answer your question? Kind of.
What I'm interested in is that you, so in your images, we can see a lot of digital or electronic components that feed into this making process that you seek to exemplify here or visualize.
Yeah.
The internet, the digital revolution how does that influence, because making is in the Global South is very much associated, at least in our minds, with some kind of hardship and poverty. It's poverty driven and has a kind of a negative association almost. But then digital age kicks in, and what happens?
Well, I can say this from experience when I was working as well in the digital sector in Nairobi, that how it just sort of propelled, it grew really, really quickly. The amount of people that have mobile phones in Kenya just increased exponentially. And with the invention of MPESA and so on, people are now more attached to their mobile phones and are digitally aware and able to perform transactions sort of in a very cash-light society now. And this is a huge part of Nairobi today, and there's a huge sector where people are now developing applications and making their own computers and doing all of this innovative things. And Juakali, when I was making the work and the series, it was really important for me to add these motifs of the motherboards and the e-waste, because that's something that is very prevalent if you go to the Dandora dump sites, or if you go to dump sites, there's a lot of e-waste. And what do you do with all of this e-waste? That you can't just burn it because it's going to be very toxic. And one of the things that I saw was that this e-waste was kind of being reused in sort of a jewelry manner, which I thought that was very interesting, and so that's why I included it. But then also to make a comment about sort of how Kenya and in Nairobi especially, they're really pushing boundaries in terms of digital development. And there are a lot of inventions that have come out of, a lot of inventions and a lot of innovations that have come out of Nairobi, like MPESA and Ushahidi and there are a few others. There's Brick, which is coming out this year sometime, which is basically a whole different innovation for a wireless existence, which is really quite amazing. And it comes off of this back of philosophy that if it could work in Africa, it could work anywhere. And that's kind of the thing that I've heard so many times. But the funny thing is, if it can work in Kenya, it not necessarily can work everywhere because MPESA doesn't really have, they have tried to put this model in different places around Africa and it hasn't worked out as well it has had worked in Kenya.
Well, to clarify, M-Pesa is the world's most advanced mobile money transfer system. With a simple phone, you can text message, codes, and transfer money, which is amazingly innovative. And I wish we had that here because I would like to pay my cab, for example.
Well, I mean, I really do feel that they needed to have some kind of financial regulation when they were putting in M-Pesa, because right now Safaricom has quite a lot of power when it comes to mobile transaction. So in a way, it's good that they've managed to push this technology forward, and in a way, it's kind of not very well financially regulated. And
yet, 25% of Kenya's BIP's gross national product is being processed via M-Pesa. But so this digital revolution is obviously not only taking place in Africa. Mario, how does the digital, in fact, because the idea of sharing design has been there before. We've seen it with Rietveld, we've seen it with Enzo Mari. What does it mean for the future of design that everybody can participate in design? Because it's it's also kind of challenging a business model that Peter is keeping up with collaborating with established designers. This is something that this is the old model. So how do we deal with this in the future?
To a certain, does it work? Are you hearing me? Yes. So. To a certain extent, it's about redefining, I think, how we define objects at large. So there's this word, virtualization, that more and more things that we are thinking of as objects, as solid things and so on, are becoming more abstract, more immaterial, more virtual. So that forces us, in my opinion, or in what we are doing, to rethink how we consider objects. And of course, it's a challenge to the existing way of making things, but it's more about going on, evolving, finding better ways to do things in the future. For us, the challenge or the problems we have to deal with is basically let's say if you just share a file or so, you lose complete control of it. Anybody can do anything with it, and it's not only for, let's say, a stream of revenue that you potentially lose, but it's also for things like it can be hacked, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. So where are the limits? It's largely about still finding boundaries and defining how can a collaboration be, what do you allow people to do, what can people do, what are they willing to do, what can we do, how can we facilitate things. And I think one of the things about that is also, I still hear often the word consumer, and I think in the way we think about things, it's more about partnerships or so. So like, what can we do together? And what can everybody bring to it? So let's say, in a certain way, I have a design education, I have experience in the field and so on, so that is still something that maybe, not everybody has. So maybe what are the things that can be done by other people? What are the things that I can do? How is the division of these roles? Well, I think to answer maybe one of my own questions, I see objects like, I'm very fascinated by what we are seeing here, by this kind of informal economy and informal way of doing things, because what I like about it is that it's very fluid. So we don't think of things in a so static way. And I think even if we want to redefine the industry, want to redefine a product, then maybe that's one key way to tackle it, to dissolve it a little bit, to open up borders, to soften it, to not in a visual way, but in the way we conceive of it. So maybe it doesn't need to be there all the time. Maybe it doesn't need to be there. in a very far away view, I would say, wouldn't it be nice to have a material world that has a life of its own, as opposed to a world that we constantly need to, fix and keep up and so on. So,
Wille, do we see any materials like that? Now, how does industry also react to this collaborative authorship of design?
Yeah, I'm sure there is. Let's say if we narrow it down to furniture industry, for example, there must be small companies that are able to react faster. But what is quite fascinating, what Maida just mentioned, is this quite open discussion with the client or the consumer or the partner, is the fact that decisions can be done quickly and it's faster information flows both directions, whereas a corporation that has to figure out everything in masses, what are the products at stock, what are the 5 different options that you have to choose, let's say the material or the paint or the fabric, or the legal issues regarding these, there's this huge complexity when producing in mass quantities, and that doesn't, with the current system, give so much options for this kind of like transparent discussion or even transparent models for pricing. But one big kind of interesting point, especially for the future in, let's say if we discuss furniture, is the size, the sheer volumes that has to be shipped and stored. It's a really big question for the future. And now with these like our automated processing and manufacturing is getting also close to the automated distribution, especially, everyone can imagine how this can be done before, but let's say the sheer size of a sofa, the size and then the technical issues, for example, lighting fixtures that need to go through a process that it's legitimate and someone can sell it without any problems with getting electrified and the safety and quality. This is something that no one has really kind of solved yet. So in a way, I think we are heading to a direction where we can customize things and start a dialogue more with people who use and buy products, but haven't seen good solutions yet.
I think there's one question that you mentioned, and that's transportation. I think is key when we speak about the global south, because things that are being produced in Australia or although it's technically, well, whatever. This is another discussion about whether this is part of the global south or not. It's south, that's for sure, and it's far away. Or Botswana. How do we tackle this very physical challenge in an age where we can produce anything digitally on location? Peter, how do you see, for your own business in the future, how will you tackle this? I mean, what's your niche? What's your USP in times when, we just push a button and we manufacture our own sofa just next door in a fab lab?
I don't know. I don't have an aversion to technology. I embrace it like everybody else. But for me, I question why we make products, and I think, is it an expression of something? Is it something that's to be used? I mean, beyond just having it functional. So for me, if technology completely erases the human input. I don't know, I'm not really knowledgeable with this subject, but for me, from a basic way of looking at it, I think if we're not involved in creating the objects that we use, if we don't find interesting ways, you know, ways that have humanity, you know, all-encompassing, not just to make things to ship efficiently to sell, but things that express a certain desire to live a certain way. So for me, it's if it's craftspeople involved, if it's design, if making a product brings together two different communities from opposite sides of the world, if we can interact and make a handmade product that has a very tactile quality about it for somebody who lives in an urban center from Africa, you know, these are the things that kind of, in my mind, whether superficially or not, justify, you know? So it's more than just making things and selling. It's what's the point? We need to do it to survive, but at the same time, it has to include, development has to be done in a way that involves people.
Mario, you're nodding.
Yeah, I was very caught by the idea that he says technology erases the human, but I don't think that can ever happen. Basically, even the most advanced technology that we're seeing now with algorithms on the internet, things like that, is basically just feeding off and imitating humanity. So I'm not concerned that something like that is going to happen. But maybe I have an example that picks up on what he was saying, which is I myself, I'm from sort of a global south, let's say European south, southern part of Italy, and it's very much, it's very similar in a certain way. So if you're talking about a sofa, you would just basically have your grandma's sofa, bring it to an upholsterer to have it reupholstered. While you have it reupholstered, you ask the upholsterer to do modifications to it to make it better suit you, so a deeper seat or a higher seat or something like that. The funny thing that is happening today is that people are bringing their IKEA sofas there to be reupholstered and modified, which of course has some problems because they're manufactured differently. But this kind of close contact by the people, this kind of that's something interesting that is missing from the industrial way of making things today. On the other hand, you have to see things like let's say a certain coherence in a product. Is that still a value or not? Or I mean, I don't have answers to that. It's more like the questions that we are trying to answer by our work as kind of a research work or work in progress. But that is certainly something that's like the coherence or the idea of the author, or let's say certain guarantees, certain standards, certain certifications. That is something that probably right now you would give up with a very informal production system. So where's the meeting point between these kind of things? What can we do to bring over maybe a certain coherence or a certain guarantee or something like that to an informal economy? Of course, in a village economy or so, if the sofa doesn't work, you just go back to the guy and tell him, what did you do? Please fix it. So, and funny enough, I'm thinking we have that with one of our products, which is cars. At every corner you find a car repair company which is maybe affiliated with a certain brand or so and so on. So, which I find strange, because for any other products we don't have that. So this ready modification of parts or so, and fixing or
Tahir, how can fixing and mending and making thrive in a world where we will have robots? I mean, we do have them already, and we will have even stronger and more intelligent robots.
I think, I mean, listening to them speak, I live in a part of New York, in Brooklyn, that's kind of interesting because it's all about knowing the person who makes the things that you use. And that's very Kenyan as well. You know, there are a lot of juakali or informal car repairmen in Kenya that can do modifications but are not really necessarily affiliated with anybody. And they create some very interesting and very innovative cars and objects. I don't know if you were in Kuona when they made their own custom car they wanted to make it look like a Mustang, but then they kind of got like a Datsun and like another Toyota, and they kind of fused it together to make something out of it. And the funny thing is that it's more about the community, and like it's more about the community of the people around you that you're creating things with, which I think is a little bit more important than the actual end product sometimes. Because, and especially in a country in Kenya, where everything is about community and everything is about the people around you, and your whole experience in life is more about creating something together and developing your community rather than making sure that the object that you're creating meets a certain benchmark or meets a certain international aesthetic that you have to conform to. And that's kind of something that I feel where the future of art, the future of design, well, I really hope that things will be functional in the future. But that I would like to see is that more people are going to become inclusive and create together. And that's what I would say that from the global south, that when it comes to design, that we should learn from.
Vile, can we emulate this feeling of being in a collaborative environment? You mentioned, this customer relation that seems to be interesting for the future of the furniture industry. Can we emulate that? I don't know, via the internet and feedback loops, or how do we implement this humane touch that Peter has been speaking about and Tahir has been speaking about into an industrial, industry 4.0?
Yes, I'm very sure. I'm positive about it, and perhaps this is already happening. If you mentioned these sort of pimping these cars or hacking, there are already companies that make sort of hacking available for customers within limits or limitations. You can kind of use your imagination to let's say circle a 3D product, and then that's being produced by that company, but your personal touch is very much visible in it. But also what's fascinating is this kind of where we come from, where companies' names usually were perhaps based on the location or the name of the family who produced the products, and the company was where the manufacturing happened. And later, of course, then perhaps the factory nowadays has nothing to do with the brand. They just produce the parts, or the parts are produced all over the world, and the company takes care of the quality, branding, packaging, and then the customer relationship. What's interesting is perhaps we'll go back to this, that you actually you can see the machine producing the parts, or the operator of the equipment who makes the product, and then this dialogue kind of goes back to where perhaps we were before. And I think this is quite interesting. As an example, I know Mario's work, and I think it's an incredible value that if the people who use your products has had a dialogue with you personally. I don't know how much you can actually do it in the future, but your time is quite precious in that sense. And I think what nowadays we might call like a good service, or you almost even get to know the person who has been helping you when you buy a product, to take that to the next level, that maybe you even have seen and kind of felt and maybe smelled the production, and I think that's quite fascinating.
I think I would like to wrap this up, although it's really interesting. Time is tight. Peter, maybe one last statement about humane design in a technological future. and hackable technological future?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't really know, but I think it goes to the fundamentals of how we. I don't want to sound philosophical, but how we live. How company structure is, how company ownership, how the maker who comes in and toils at the machine day in, day out, and is expected to do these creative objects. Creative center is completely removed from him, and how do you get everyone involved? To me, that's the question. How is it that when we design a piece, or the process of conceiving of a product, how do we get everyone involved, really honestly involved? Not cheap labor, not fair trade, not well paid, just how do you genuinely get everyone involved, and how do you get that feeling of? That's the question that I'm constantly asking as we're going on. There's no answer yet, but how do you conform to company structure, but at the same time, how do you do all of these things? So.
Thank you. That's a nice final word. How do we get everybody involved, really involved? Thank you for this interesting discussion.